Egyptians mourn more than 200 victims who died in a plane crash over Sinai as search efforts resume at the crash site and Russian experts recover bodies and begin investigations into the cause of the incident. In fresh clashes between Palestinians and Israeli security forces, a Palestinian youth is fatally shot east of the city of Hebron. Turkey's general election swept the AK party back to a parliamentary majority and a single-party rule in an unexpected victory for President Tayyip Erdogan. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. His Majesty King Abdullah, as part of his outreach to communities across the kingdom, was in Amman today, where he met with dignitaries and community leaders to discuss with them the governorate's need in terms of services and development projects and urged government officials to expedite projects aimed at upgrading public services in the city and surrounding areas. King Abdullah highlighted the need to establish a railway network, among other infrastructural projects, to link Amman and Aqaba, which would help promote development and facilitate the execution of projects. Other projects lined up for the governorate include a renewable energy plants expected to create numerous work opportunities for Amman youth. Accompanying His Majesty on the visit were the Chief of the Royal Court, His Majesty's Advisor for Military Affairs, His Majesty's Advisor for Tribal Affairs, the Director for His Majesty's Office, as well as the Interior Minister and Amman senior officials. Separately, His Majesty and the Saudi monarch Salman bin Abdullaziz discussed over the telephone a number of regional developments. King Abdullah thanked the Saudi monarch for his support to Arab issues, and the two leaders stressed the need to maintain and further enhance the strategic ties between the two countries. Grieving a Russian piled flowers high at the St. Petersburg Pulkovo airport, mourning more than 200 victims who died as they flew home over Egypt. Meanwhile, an official of a Moscow-based aviation agency said the Airbus broke up in mid-air, but stressed it was too early to draw conclusions from this. Search efforts resumed at the crash site today, and Russian experts were already at the site helping to recover bodies and began investigation into the cause. Here's more.
It remains unclear what caused Flight 9268 to suddenly drop off radar in clear weather after only 23 minutes in the air and hurtled the ground. Egypt's civil aviation minister said both black boxes of the plane have been found and that communications between the plane and air traffic control before the crash was normal, with nothing irregular occurring before the accident. The Egyptian Prime Minister also said there did not appear to be any unusual activity behind the crash, but the facts would not be clear until further investigations has been carried out. And the mystery of the crash continues. In a desolate area of stony ground, little remains from the Russian airliner except its blackened wreckage and a heap of colorful suitcases. Emergency teams and Russian investigators arrived at the scene of the plane crash that killed 224 people in the Sinai Peninsula. Airport sources said they brought with them DNA samples from relatives to help identify the dead. They scoured the area where the Airbus came down, collecting into a pile the dead holidaymakers' belongings that were spread around the main part of the wreckage. Here and there, clothing could be seen, packed by tourists on their way home from Sharm el-Sheikh. A French air accident team, including investigators from Airbus, was expected to arrive in Cairo to assist with inspecting the plane's black box. The French officials will be joined by investigators from Germany. Russian ministers also arrived in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula at the crash site, including the transport and emergencies ministers. But Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said the investigation could take months. Sisi made his statement at the 20th Education Seminar organized by the Egyptian Armed Forces. After inviting the attendees to stand for a minute's silence, Sisi offered his own and Egypt's condolences to Russia for their loss.
In truth, as we remember this shocking accident, we direct condolences from Egypt and its people, and from me personally to the Russian state, leadership, government and people. And it's very important for us to know that during such accidents it's very important that this matter be left alone and that discussions of the reasons behind it should not take place because this takes a very long time. These are complicated matters that require very advanced techniques and broad investigations that could take months.
In the Russian capital, flags flew at half-mast at Moscow city center and church services were held as Russia mourns the victims of the crash. President Vladimir Putin declared a day of national mourning. Across Russia, people paid tribute to the victims of the plane crash, laying flowers and lighting candles. At Pulkovo Airport in St. Petersburg, where the aircraft was supposed to end its journey, mourners paid their respects to victims at a makeshift memorial. Although the plane passed a routine check before it took off, speculation is the cause of the crash may be a technical failure. Experts say it is unusual for an aircraft to go down after around 20 minutes in the sky because at this point, a plane is on autopilot. At this point, it is reaching its initial cruising altitude and there is little that can or should go wrong. And the mystery continues. Ali Tuqan for the news at 10.
In fresh clashes between Palestinians and Israeli security forces, a Palestinian was fatally shot east of the city of Hebron. Following the funeral procession of two Palestinian youth, both shot dead by the Israeli army last week, Palestinians rallied near an Israeli settlement on the outskirts of Hebron before clashes erupted. Witnesses said the youth, whose identity remained unknown, was shot and left to bleed to death by the Israeli army soldiers who claimed he ran towards them with a knife.
The Israeli occupation forces have executed this youth in cold blood. He was not holding any knife or any other dangerous tool. They shot him because he was running. This is what I have seen, and this is what I have captured with my camera.
With today's fatality, the total number of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces since the beginning of the unrest has reached 73. Amnesty International said in a statement that Israeli forces using international lethal forces without justification must end the pattern of unlawful killings carried out against Palestinians. The organization has documented at least 4 incidents in which Palestinians were deliberately shot dead by Israeli forces when they posed no imminent threat to life. Israel has been refusing to return the bodies of Palestinians shot dead during a recent surge of violence, but today Israeli Minister Moshe Ya'alon said the bodies would be returned if Palestinians agreed to keep funeral modest, as he put it. Briefing reporters, Ya'alon said the security cabinet had initially intended to withhold the bodies, but reassessed that because the resentment it stirred among Palestinians. Since last week, Israeli had returned 8 corpses of Palestinians who allegedly attacked Israeli security, but according to Palestinian monitors, Israel is still holding 21 bodies. It has been 20 years since Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by a Jewish extremist. Every year since the assassination, the public gathers at a site of his assassination for a peace rally in remembrance. This year's rally, which took place late yesterday, was attended by former U.S. President Bill Clinton, who paid tribute to Rabin's peace effort. Here's more in this report.
Thousands of Israelis packed the Tel Aviv square where Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated 20 years earlier. He was killed by an ultra-nationalist Jew opposed to Rabin's interim peace talks with the Palestinians. Rabin's efforts earned him and late Palestinian President Yasser Arafat the Nobel Peace Prize. US President Barack Obama, speaking on a giant screen, told the crowd Rabin's dream was not dead.
In these difficult days, for Israelis, for Palestinians, and for the region, Yitzhak's life, his dream, inspire us still.
Rabin's death stunned the nation and dashed international hopes that the former general might achieve peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Former US President Bill Clinton, who attended Saturday's rally in person, helped broker the 1993 Oslo interim peace talks between Rabin and Arafat.
Next step will be determined by whether you decide that Yitzhak Rabin was right, that you have to share the future with your neighbors, that you have to give their children a chance too, that you have to stand for peace, that the risk for peace are not as severe as the risk of walking away from it.
Rabin's death had a lasting impression on many of those who attended the memorial rally.
With that bullet or those bullets, I feel that and I see that the hope is gone.
Violence, it has no place in our society, and that together, without the right, left, everyone together, we can make a change and hopefully make this a better country.
The rally was part of a week of commemorations as Israel faces one of the worst waves of Palestinian violence in decades. The latest bloodsheds fueled in part by tensions over a holy site in Jerusalem sacred to Muslims and Jews.
The European Union announced it would allocate an extra $31 million to Jordan to help it meet the urgent needs of Syrian refugees as winter sets in. EU Commissioner for Humanitarian Affairs and Crisis Management, Christos Stylianidis, made the announcement during a visit to the Zaatari camp, home to 80,000 refugees from Syria. Stylianidis toured the camp and met with UN officials who work there as well as refugee families. He also visited a Syrian family living in the town of Mafraq near Zaatari. Jordan has taken in 1.4 million Syrians fleeing the war.
Here in Zaatari refugee camps again, and I've seen today with my own eyes the human suffering. The difficulties of Syrians who have been forced to flee their country, searching for a temporary sanctuary here in Jordan. Today, I'm announcing the allocation of 20 million euros specifically for Jordan. 28. This money will assist for the urgent needs of Syrian refugees and their host communities.
United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, held talks in Damascus with Syrian Foreign Minister Walid Maalem. His two-day visit to Syria came after world powers and regional rival met in Vienna to try to find a solution to the country's 4-year civil war. Participants at Vienna talks called for a nationwide ceasefire and the renewal of stalled UN-brokered talks between the government and opposition, but failed to agree on the role President Bashar al-Assad should take into Syria's future. Syrian state television said al-Maalem recognizes the importance of the Vienna peace talks statement. In his meeting with de Mistura, he also reiterated Damascus' position that the fight against terrorism must take priority for a political solution to be reached. On the ground in Syria, members of Daesh terrorist group have reportedly driven Syrian forces from a town in the west of the country as fighting seemed to intensify despite international diplomacy and talks between regional rivals. According to the Observatory for Human Rights, Daesh took the town of Mahin in the southwest of Homs province in a fierce assault that began by detonating 2 suicide car bombs. Some 50 fighters on the government side were killed, and clashes raged afterwards in the outskirts of the nearby town of Sadat. The advance brought Daesh within 20 kilometers of the north-south highway linking Damascus to Syria's other main cities, Homs, Hama, and Aleppo. The observatory said the attack might have been a response to pressure the group is under elsewhere, including in northern province of Aleppo. In a statement by the U.S.-led coalition, a total of 9 airstrikes were launched against Daesh targets in Syria and 16 in Iraq. In Syria, airstrikes involving fighter, grounder attack, and drone aircraft targeted 2 locations, 6 strikes near Mar'a and 3 strikes near Al-Hol. And in Iraq, airstrikes involving bomber attack, ground attack, and drone aircraft targeted 7 locations near Al-Huwayja, Biji, Mosul, Ramadi, Sinjar, Sultan Abdullah, and Tal Afar. Back here at home, Prime Minister Abdullahs said the numbers of the 2016 budget, now in the making, will be realistic with no window dressing, reiterating that the government has no interest in giving unrealistic numbers. The Prime Minister was chairing a meeting of the Budget Advisory Council, during which he urged the competent ministries and state institutions to speed up the process of drafting the budget so that it can be passed to Parliament as soon as possible. The meeting at the General Budget Department examined the main features of the draft document, particularly spending control and a focus on development projects that serve national economic goals. The 2016 budget is characterized as developmental, with growth in capital expenditures. Separately, Mansour assured his government is keen to maintain full coordination with the Senate to implement the vision and directive of His Majesty the King and promote a comprehensive reform process. During a meeting with Senate President Faisal Al-Fayez, Mansour said his government is committed to strengthening partnership with the legislative body in line with the Constitution and in the service of the Kingdom's developmental process. Al-Fayez said the Senate will spare no effort to actively contribute to the overall reform process to fulfill His Majesty's directive. Turkey's general election swept the AK party back to a parliamentary majority and a single-party rule in an unexpected victory, an outcome that will boost the power of President Tayyip Erdogan but may sharpen deep social division. The vote was Turkey's second in 5 months after the AKP in June lost the overall majority it had enjoyed since 2002, prompted by its inability to find a junior coalition partner. Erdogan had presented the polls as a chance to restore stability after a ceasefire with Kurdish militants collapsed and 2 suicide bomb attacks by Daesh that killed more than 130 people. Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu, speaking to a cheering crowd outside his home in the central Anatolian city of Konya, said the outcome of the election was a victory for Turkey's democracy and people. Davutoglu was to make a broad policy speech this evening. Over to the migrant crisis. German Chancellor Angela Merkel failed to resolve differences within her ruling coalition on dealing with a huge refugee influx, leaving open a row that deterred her conservative popularity. In Slovenia, meanwhile, around 2,600 people waited at a camp in Sentigi on the border with Austria, having spent the night in heated tents as the temperature outside have fallen sharply. Austrian police said the emergency accommodation across the country was almost full, which would soon pose a problem for the thousands of migrants arriving at the border. To be able to relocate refugees, Italy is being asked to set up immigration centers managed jointly with EU officials called hotspots. The hotspots are intended to better identify migrants and keep those who do not qualify for asylum from moving to Northern Europe. We begin with tennis. An emotional Agnieszka Radwanska claimed her maiden WTA final title with a rollercoaster 6-2, 4-6, 6-3 victory over Petra Kvitova at the Singapore Indoor Stadium. Playing a first final in her 7th appearance at the season-ending event, the 6th-ranked Polish also created history by becoming the first woman to lift the title after completing a round-robin play with a 1-2 record. Radwanska breezed through her next 2 service games to wrap up a dominant first set in 33 minutes, and the 26-year-old was threatening to blow Kvitova off the court.
2015 BNP Paribas WTA Finals Singapore, presented by SC Global Singles Champion Agnieszka Radwanska.
And over to motor racing. Porsche won the 2015 FIA World Endurance Manufacturers Championship after Mark Webber, Timo Bernhard and Brendan Hartley clinched victory in Shanghai. Driving the number 17 Porsche 919 hybrid, Mark Webber crossed the finishing line ahead of the sister number 18 Porsche 919 hybrid, driven by Romain Dumas, Mark Lieb and Neil Jani, to extend their title lead in the 2015 FIA World Endurance Championship by scoring a third consecutive victory. The final round will take place in Bahrain between November 17 and 19.
Check your flag, baby. Check your flag, baby.
And finally, relatively cold weather continues in most regions tonight, with possible light rain in the eastern regions, while winds will be northeasterly moderate to brisk. Unstable weather conditions affect the kingdom tomorrow, with a continued chance for rain in the northern and eastern regions of the country. Winds will be northeasterly moderate to brisk, steering dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect moderate conditions tomorrow, with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, is a recap of our top stories. Russians mourn more than 200 victims who died in a plane crash over Sinai. Search efforts resumed at the crash site today, and Russian experts recover bodies and begin investigations into the cause. In fresh clashes between Palestinians and Israeli security forces, a Palestinian was fatally shot east of the city of Hebron. Turkey's general election swept the AK party back to a parliamentary majority and a single-party rule in an unexpected victory. And with this we come to an end. I'm Farah Ajlouni. Thank you for watching and have a good night.